The death of Alex, just 45 years old, struck like lightning from a clear sky. One moment he was vibrant and full of life, the next he was gone, claimed by a sudden heart attack. For Mrs. Rose, his 67-year-old mother, the loss was more than grief. It was the collapse of the one constant anchor she had in her later years. She had devoted herself to Alex, moving in with him and his wife 2 years earlier, after selling her modest home and contributing $40,000 toward the down payment on their house. She thought she was securing a place not just for her son's future, but for her own sense of belonging. But grief had barely settled before betrayal surfaced. Chloe, Alex's widow, revealed a side of herself that Mrs. Rose had long suspected but never wanted to believe. Within hours of the funeral, Chloe's demeanor hardened. Gone was the polite, if distant, daughter-in-law. In her place stood a woman whose eyes were sharp with calculation, her voice clipped and devoid of empathy. The day after Alex's burial, Chloe confronted Mrs. Rose in the living room that once echoed with family dinners and quiet evenings. With a flat, unyielding tone, she declared that the house was hers alone, that Mrs. Rose's $40,000 contribution meant nothing. She dismissed the years of shared meals, the quiet companionship, and the sacrifices with chilling detachment. "You're a complication," Chloe spat, her lips curling as though the presence of the grieving mother was a stain she could no longer tolerate. "You don't belong here. This is my space now." Shaken, Mrs. Rose pleaded softly, reminding Chloe that this was the only roof she had left, that Alex had wanted them to live together as family. But her words fell on deaf ears. Chloe had already packed some of her things into a small suitcase and placed it by the door, as though Mrs. Rose were nothing more than an unwanted guest overstaying her welcome. By evening, Mrs. Rose found herself stepping into the night air with nowhere to go, her heart heavy with grief and humiliation. She used what little remained of her savings to check into a rundown motel on the edge of town, a place with flickering neon lights and the faint smell of mildew in the halls. Alone in that dimly lit room, with its thin walls and creaking bed frame, she wept not only for her son but for the cruel abandonment that followed so swiftly after his death. In the space of a single day, Mrs. Rose had lost not only her child but also her home, her sense of safety, and her place in the family she had helped to build. The tragedy of Alex's death had left her heartbroken, but Chloe's betrayal left her feeling erased. 2 weeks passed in a blur of grief and quiet despair. Mrs. Rose's life at the motel became a bleak routine. Cold coffee in styrofoam cups, sleepless nights on a lumpy mattress, and the gnawing anxiety of watching her savings dwindle with each passing day. Every morning she stared at the faded wallpaper, asking herself how everything had unraveled so quickly. She had buried her only son and, within hours, been cast aside by the woman who had vowed to love him. Then, just as her hope seemed at its lowest, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, and unexpected. Mr. Bennett, Alex's longtime lawyer. He informed her that she had been named a beneficiary in Alex's will and was required to attend the official reading at his office. For a moment, Mrs. Rose was too stunned to speak. She had assumed Chloe would inherit everything. Alex had worked hard to provide for his wife, after all. The thought that he might have left something for his mother filled her with both surprise and a cautious flicker of relief. On the day of the reading, Mrs. Rose dressed in her best clothes, a simple navy dress that still carried the faint scent of lavender soap. She arrived at the law office, a stately building with polished wood panels and the faint smell of leather-bound books. But her moment of fragile hope quickly soured when she saw Chloe and her younger brother Daniel already waiting in the lobby. Their expressions hardened at the sight of her, as if her mere presence was an intrusion. "Well, isn't this interesting?" Chloe muttered under her breath, her voice dripping with disdain. Daniel smirked beside her, folding his arms as though preparing for a confrontation. Inside the conference room, tension thickened. Mr. Bennett, a composed man with silver hair and a reassuring voice, began reading Alex's will. Chloe leaned back in her chair with smug confidence, certain of her dominance. Daniel sat close by, glaring at Mrs. Rose as if daring her to challenge his sister's claim. The first portion of the will unfolded exactly as Chloe had anticipated. Alex left her the family home, the car, his life insurance policy, and his retirement accounts. Chloe shot Mrs. Rose a triumphant glance, her lips curving into a thin smile that seemed to say, "You see? This was always mine." Mrs. Rose sat silently, hands clasped tightly in her lap, heart pounding. She felt the sting of exclusion but remained composed, reminding herself that Alex had been thoughtful, careful. There had to be more, something beyond Chloe's smug certainty. And indeed, as Mr. Bennet paused before turning to the final section of the document, Mrs. Rose noticed a subtle shift in his tone. It carried the weight of something deliberate, something unexpected. A hush fell over the room, and for the first time since Alex's death, Mrs. Rose sensed that Chloe's control over the narrative might not be as absolute as she believed. The room seemed to tighten as Mr. Bennet reached the final page of the will. His calm, steady voice carried a gravity that immediately silenced even Chloe's smug confidence. "There is one final provision," he said, lifting his eyes to meet Mrs. Rose's. 3 months before his passing, Alex amended his will to include a special clause. Chloe's smirk faltered. Daniel leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. Mrs. Rose held her breath, uncertain what was coming. Mr. Bennet continued. Alex designated that the full contents of safety deposit box E3D7 at First National Bank, along with all documents and related account information, are to pass directly and exclusively to his mother, Mrs. Rose Fairfield. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a heartbeat, the room was utterly still. Then Chloe exploded. "What?" she shouted, slamming her hand against the polished oak table. "That's ridiculous. That box should be mine. Everything of his should be mine." Her voice shook with fury, but Mr. Bennet remained composed. "I can assure you, Mrs. Sullivan, this clause is valid and legally binding. The bank has instructions that access is granted to Mrs. Rose alone. Not to you. Not to anyone else." Chloe's face twisted with rage, her carefully composed facade cracking into something raw and venomous. "You think you're clever, old woman?" she hissed at Mrs. Rose. "You think this changes anything? You're broke, homeless. That box won't feed you." Daniel leaned in, whispering something to Chloe, but she brushed him off and turned back to Mr. Bennet. "I'll contest this. I'll fight it in court." Alex was pressured. Alex updated this clause willingly, and with full legal counsel, Mr. Bennet interrupted firmly. "You may try to contest it, but you will not succeed. I was present when he signed the amendment myself." Chloe sat back, seething, her nails tapping furiously against the table. Mrs. Rose, still stunned, said nothing. Inside, however, a flicker of hope stirred. Alex had thought of her. He had prepared something she didn't yet understand, but it was hers alone. When the meeting concluded, Chloe stormed out first, yanking Daniel by the arm. As Mrs. Rose stepped into the hallway, Chloe suddenly spun on her, her voice low and venomous. "You may have your little box, but don't think this gives you power. You need my goodwill more than I need yours. Don't forget you've got nowhere to live. No one to help you." With that, Chloe turned on her heel and disappeared through the glass doors, leaving Mrs. Rose shaken but also strangely resolute. For the first time since Alex's funeral, she felt a glimmer of strength. Whatever waited inside that safety deposit box, Alex had wanted her to have it, and she was determined to find out why. 3 days later, Mrs. Rose stood in the marble lobby of First National Bank, clutching the small brass key Mr. Bennet had given her. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and disinfectant, and the security guard's eyes followed her as she nervously approached the counter. "I'm here to access safety deposit box E3D7, she said, her voice trembling. After presenting her ID and signing the logbook, a bank officer escorted her down a long, silent corridor lined with vault doors. The metallic click of locks echoed as the officer withdrew a narrow box and placed it on the table of a small private room. "Take all the time you need, ma'am," he said gently, before closing the door behind her. With shaking hands, Mrs. Rose slid the box open. Inside, resting neatly on top, was a sealed envelope with her name written in Alex's familiar handwriting. Her breath caught. She hadn't seen his writing since before the heart attack took him. Carefully, she broke the seal and unfolded the letter. "My dearest Mom," it began. As her eyes moved across the page, tears welled. Alex confessed he had known for years what Chloe truly was: manipulative, greedy, and incapable of genuine love. He wrote that he had feared she would one day cast his mother aside, so he quietly prepared. He reminded her of the $40,000 she had given him from the sale of her home, a sacrifice he never forgot. Instead of using it directly for the mortgage, Alex had invested the funds. With careful planning, that seed money had grown to $185,000, all under accounts in Mrs. Rose's name. "You thought you gave me everything you had left," the letter read. "But really, you gave me a chance to protect you. This money is yours, Mom. Always was, always will be." Mrs. Rose pressed the letter to her chest, sobbing quietly. For the first time since Alex's passing, she felt his presence close again. His love, his foresight, his determination to shield her even in death. But the letter did not end there. Alex had gone further. In a second paragraph, he explained that he had kept meticulous records of Chloe's cruelty. Emails mocking his mother, text messages filled with insults, even voice recordings where Chloe derided her as a burden. He had archived everything, placing copies into this very box. "If Chloe ever tries to destroy you," Alex wrote, "she will destroy herself first. Every lie she told, every insult she hurled, it's all here. Evidence she cannot erase." Mrs. Rose sifted through the stack of USB drives, printed screenshots, and signed affidavits. Her heart raced with both sorrow and relief. Alex had anticipated Chloe's schemes, and he had armed his mother with proof powerful enough to silence her once and for all. When she finally left the bank, the weight of grief remained heavy, but now it was balanced by something else: resolve. For the first time, Mrs. Rose was no longer just a victim of Chloe's cruelty. She carried Alex's legacy in her hands, and with it, the power to fight back. The invitation came in the form of a short, clipped message. "Let's have lunch. We should talk." Against her better judgment, Mrs. Rose agreed. Some part of her hoped Chloe had softened, that grief might have shaken loose a shred of decency. The house looked the same as the day she had been expelled. Perfectly manicured lawn, curtains drawn, the illusion of respectability. But as Mrs. Rose stepped inside, she felt a chill. Chloe greeted her with a fixed smile that didn't reach her eyes. The dining table was already set with wine glasses, roasted chicken, and expensive china, but the atmosphere was anything but warm. "So," Chloe began, swirling her glass, "I assume you've opened the box by now. I hope you realize it's better for both of us if we share what's inside. After all, you don't want to spend your final years all alone, do you?" Mrs. Rose stayed silent, letting Chloe's words hang heavy. Chloe leaned forward, her tone sharpening. "You need me, Rose. Whatever Alex left you, if anything, you'll be safer if it's under my management. Think of it as goodwill between family." At that moment, Mrs. Rose's trembling hands steadied. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small folder. With deliberate calm, she slid several sheets across the table. Chloe frowned, picking one up. It was a printed screenshot of a text message exchange with her brother Daniel. "The old bat is still hanging around. Can't wait until she croaks and I can have the whole house." Color drained from Chloe's face. Mrs. Rose's voice was quiet but firm. "Alex saw everything. He documented every cruel word, every lie." She laid out more evidence: copies of financial statements Chloe had falsified, emails where she exaggerated debts, and even a transcript showing her discussing with Daniel a plan to have Mrs. Rose declared legally incompetent so she could seize her pension. "You told everyone I was a burden," Mrs. Rose continued, her eyes burning with both sorrow and strength. "But Alex was the one secretly paying the mortgage for 2 years. Not you, not once. You lied to me, to him, to everyone, while he shielded me from your schemes." Chloe's hand shook as she set the papers down. The mask of control she had worn for so long cracked. Her voice rose, shrill with panic. "You have no right to dig into my private messages." None of this will hold up, Guy, but Mrs. Rose cut her off. "It's not me you need to fear, Chloe. It's Alex. He left this trail for a reason. He wanted me to survive you." For the first time, Chloe was speechless. The confident manipulator, who had believed she could push a grieving widow into submission, now sat exposed, cornered by the very man she had betrayed, even after his death. Mrs. Rose gathered the papers back into her folder, her composure unbroken. She rose from the table, looking Chloe in the eye. This lunch was never about reconciliation. It was about truth. "And now, Chloe, you know I have it. All of it." Without another word, Mrs. Rose walked out, leaving Chloe shaking in her chair, surrounded by the evidence of her own cruelty. The tension in the room was unbearable. Chloe's face flushed with rage as Mrs. Rose calmly spread the documents across the polished oak table. The pile was a fortress of proof: emails, bank statements, and Alex's meticulous notes, each page a shield forged by her late son. "You can't sue me." "Chloe," Mrs. Rose said, her tone steady but edged with steel. Alex documented everything. He knew what you were, and he left a trail so clear that no judge, no lawyer could deny it. He built this protection for me. Chloe's fists clenched against the table. How much? She shouted, her voice cracking. What did he leave you? Tell me now. Mrs. Rose remained seated, her back straight, her gaze unwavering. That, she replied, her words deliberate, is none of your business. Not now, not ever. Her refusal only deepened Chloe's fury. She slammed her palm against the table, rattling the documents, but Mrs. Rose didn't flinch. Instead, she gathered the papers into her folder, sliding them back inside with measured calm. You see, Chloe, she continued, Alex saw everything. He knew every insult, every scheme, every lie you told. He understood who you were long before I did. And with his last act, he chose to protect me. Even in death, his love outweighed your greed. For the first time, Chloe faltered. The fire in her eyes dimmed, replaced by the realization that she had lost. Not just money, not just control, but the image she had carefully crafted of herself as untouchable. Mrs. Rose rose to her feet, her posture radiating dignity. She looked around the house one last time, the same house she had helped build with her sacrifice, the same place where she had once been treated as an intruder. Now it no longer felt like a prison. It was simply Chloe's cage, closing in. Without another word, Mrs. Rose turned and walked toward the door. Each step was lighter than the last, as though the burden of years had finally lifted. Outside, the air felt different, brisk, clean, filled with possibility. For the first time in a long while, Mrs. Rose smiled. She was free from manipulation, free from cruelty, and finally free to live her life on her own terms. With Alex's foresight and love as her shield, she carried not just financial security, but something far greater: liberation. The battle was over. And Mrs. Rose had won.